Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the 21st CCLC National Technical Assistance Center team, we want to say welcome to all of you new leaders as you join us for this three-part series where we'll share best practices and approaches for structuring your program from the ground up. And so we'll talk about a series of things over the next few days, but we want to say welcome. You are joining a cohort of people who are making a difference for our nation's children. And so that's a place that I think you should be excited to stand. My name is Hillary Jones. I am one of the senior TA liaisons with the 21st CCLC NTAC. And I come to out of school time and started working in out of school time with really very little training and background for the work that I was getting ready to do. I knew how to be a teacher, but I remember that first summer walking into running summer programming and the challenges I faced and the fails I had. And I am very thankful for resources like the NTAC that support this work. But since then, I spent really 8 years running programs and learned a lot that season, and have spent the last 3 years providing support to 21st CCLC programs across the country. With me today is Brittany Stanton. Brittany, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Hillary. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I come from an education background and ran some after-school programs as a classroom teacher, but really immersed myself in OST about 5 years ago whenever I started working for a nonprofit that was running OST programming. And similar to the sentiments Hillary shared, being immersed in it and learning as you go and having wins and having things that I was going to learn from all along the way. And recently having joined the NTAC team to be able to provide supports to other program people, whether it's frontline staff or leaders. And we're excited to have you join us for this three-part series and hopefully provide you with some supports that you'll find useful as you embark on a new part of your journey.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brittany. So right this moment, I hope we are going to be able to open the chat box, and we would love to have you introduce yourselves, share with us the state you're from, and your role in your 21st CCLC program. So we want to get to know you over the next several days. And so as we do that, there'll be times where you can use the chat box, but also you can always share your questions in our Q&A box that you can access at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see it, click more and you can see where it says Q&A and just drop your questions there. We would love to make sure that they get answered. That said, if you're new to the 21st CCLC National Technical Assistance Center and you haven't heard about it before, we're here to support 21st CCLC programs and the leaders who do the work in these programs, from state education agency coordinators to program leaders, whether your title is a program director or out of school director, program manager, whatever your title may be, the site coordinators, those who are boots on the ground leading the work at each site, and frontline staff to build a lasting success for the young people that are involved in our programs. And we really provide all kinds of technical assistance and professional development for programs and program leaders across our country. We have 7 priority areas that we focus this work around, and they're based largely on what all of you have said that you need, what leaders who came before you have said that they need. But our main priority is to help build the capacity of you and your programs. Our priorities range from pandemic recovery to assuring you have what your students need, that they have access to equitable resources, that we support SEL and academic needs, and that we can help you make a difference for these young people. So Over the next 3 days, we are going to talk about today everything 21st CCLC. So we will talk about some of the maybe most boring, but also most important pieces of 21st CCLC programs. And I say they're the most boring parts because when we have to talk about legislation and guidance, they're not the most interesting parts of our work. The young people are, but they're very, very important to what we do. Tomorrow, we'll talk about strategies for managing your program's moving parts because there's a lot to know and do about 21st CCLC programs. And then on Thursday, we'll talk about needs assessments and intentional activity design to make sure you're offering high quality programs in your state, in your county, in your school, in your community-based organization. So welcome to you all. We are pleased to have you here. Today, we're going to really work to talk about the federal, state, and local laws and regulations that guide your 21st CCLC programs. We're going to talk about evidence-based practices and talk a little bit about stakeholders who you need to have as part of your program team, those whose words matter and who you need to be listening to. So we are going to kick things off with a quick poll. And so even though this is the new Leaders Academy, we know some of you might have previous experience with 21st CCLC programs. And so we want to hear from you what best represents your experience level. So you might be brand new, not sure what the CCLC stands for, or you may have been working in them or be familiar with them. And some of you maybe have been around for a long time, but you're new to the role that you're in. And that's okay. We welcome all of you in this conversation. We're glad you're here today. And honestly, Brittany, this looks like a pretty balanced group, huh?
Yeah, I'm just noticing that in that we have, we're still taking poll results here, but it seems pretty evenly spread.
Yeah. I agree. So we'll give you just another little bit to answer that question, and let us know what kind of experience you have. But if you're somebody who says, I've been around 21st CCLC for a while, I know a lot of the things that are important around these types of programming. My question to you is, what advice would you offer as a seasoned 21st CCLC professional offer to somebody who's brand new to 21st CCLC? Brittany, you got any advice you want to offer just out of the gate?
Yeah, read the RFP or RFA. We'll talk about that. Know what you're in for. I mean, and I don't mean that in like a, intimidating way. I'm very serious. Like you got to know what was written and you got to know what's expected by your state, by your district, whatever, it is that's kind of responsible for the existence of your program, right? Know what you signed up for.
Yeah. Well, and so many of these leaders, they're hired after, especially if it's a new grant, they're hired after that RFP or RFA, that proposal for the grant has been written. But we've got some other great recommendations in here, right? Develop that leadership team to support your program. We also will talk more about that today, but that's another huge one. Then you're not doing it on your own. Building a team of organized staff, that takes a lot of work, but it's so worth it. And Yana says, build that really strong relationship with your school day partners as early as possible. If you start now, it will set you up for success throughout the rest of your grant. So thank you all. Our answers have slowed down, but really we landed in a place where there's a pretty even kind of balance to who we have in the room, a few more with some familiarity to 21st CCLC programs than maybe our brand new people or our veterans. So we're glad you're here. But thank you for joining us today. So we're going to start at the very beginning, and that is this. What is this 21st CCLC program? So the 21st Community Learning, 21st Century Community Learning Centers are federally funded programs by the U.S. Department of Education that support academic enrichment opportunities during non-school hours for children and students who attend high poverty and low performing schools, right? These community centers help meet state and local standards in academic areas, such as reading, such as math, and it offers our students a wide variety of enrichment opportunities and activities to complement their regular academic or school day learning. So this is above and beyond learning, and it provides services not only to the youth, but to the families of the students who are part of these programs. So these 21st CCLC learning centers, they're providing services to students before school, after school, on the weekends, and in summer, any time that our students aren't in school. And they're a crucial part of the puzzle that our students need to support them and their families so that they can succeed and compete on a global scale. So we want to begin by reviewing some of the fundamental goals of the 21st CCLC program. Specifically, we want to focus on the areas which we must universally remember, which we must really focus on and provide academic enrichment, right? Or services that support students to meet academic standards. And this may sound very broad, but it's something that your state can further define. But we are all working towards improving our students' ELA and math skills. We also accomplish these goals by providing a broad array of additional services. We want to provide these enrichment supports for our young people. So we're going to begin with a quick review of the Every Student Succeeds Act, because it really takes us back to the beginning. By keeping the Every Student Succeeds Act in mind, as we'll discuss later, your program's RFP or RFA, like Brittany mentioned, at the forefront of all decision making, we can craft plans that are intentionally designed to fulfill our grants. And that's really what matters. We want to make sure that we're staying focused on providing these supports so that our students are getting the help and support that they need. So, some laws and guidance that you need to have in mind. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some language that you may hear thrown around. And if you hear language during the webinar today, tomorrow, on Thursday that you're not familiar with and that we don't define for you, please let us know in the Q&A box. We want to make sure that we answer it for you. But that said, one, we will talk some about legislation. So legislation, very simply, is a governmental law that must be complied with to remain within legal boundaries. 21st CCLC programs are informed by legislation at the federal level and in some places at the state level. Second is non-regulatory guidance. This is information that helps you, the people who are running programs, interpret legislation and regulations. It's not legally binding, but it is best to use non-regulatory guidance to guide your decision-making for your programs in order to help as you decide and move forward with what you're going to do. And the last is regulations. These are policies and procedures for all entities that receive federal grants, and these contain internal controls and grant management standards to ensure that the funds that you're receiving for your 21st CCLC programs are lawfully expended. So rules based on legislation that help provide guidance when enforcing the law. Now, it is essential that you as the leaders understand the legislation, the non-regulatory guidance, and the regulations, right? Whether you're a state leader, the state education agency, sometimes we call you the SEA coordinator or someone else from the state agency, whether you're a program director or program manager, whether you're a site coordinator, you need to understand that there are some rules that guide what you're supposed to do in your program, and you have an essential role to play in supporting legal compliance, but also the goals of this program at a variety of levels. Because you'll hear me say in a little bit that every 21st CCLC program in the nation is working to accomplish the same goals in some very large ways. And so we are part of a bigger project. You're part of something more than just your school or your district. So when you hear some of this language around legislation, around non-regulatory guidance, and around regulations, there's a few specific ones that we're going to talk about today that inform the 21st CCLC programs. And so we want to ask you, how familiar are you with them? So we have another poll for you. How familiar are you with the laws, regulations, and guidance that inform 21st CCLC programs? We have the names of some of them listed on your screen, or at least the abbreviations for them. But we want to know, do you know them like the back of your hand? Have you read parts of them? Understand the key elements? Or are you in the place where you go, I just need some help around this? I'm looking for some more information. Well, we've got a few people, Brittany, who know them like the back of their hand, but most of the people in this group, more than half, have said, like, I need some help around some of these things. And we're here today to give you the first taste of some of that help, but it's not the last taste. We hope you'll stay connected with the work we're doing at the 21st CCLC NTAC, get more ideas, get more resources. So when we talk about legislation, non-regulatory guidance, and regulations, under the category of legislation, those laws, we're going to start by talking about the Every Student Succeeds Act, which I mentioned quickly earlier, and the Government Performance and Results Act, which I didn't name but also mentioned earlier. Then we'll talk about non-regulatory guidance, and then we will talk about the regulations. Brittany actually will talk about some of the regulations. She'll talk about uniform guidance and the Education Department General Administrative Regulations. So that's kind of our agenda around laws, regulations, and guidance. And these are the things that you should be on the lookout for and thinking about. So the first is the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. So this is an update from previous education law, which you may have heard someone talk about before, No Child Left Behind. And ESSA provides funding and outlines the purpose and requirements of 21st CCLC programs. So key program requirements include, and you've already seen these ones today, but I'm going to say them again. Number one, that programs must offer a broad array of additional services and activities. Number two, programs must offer families of students served by 21st CCLC opportunities for learning. And number three, programs must offer opportunities for academic enrichment. This can include tutoring or other ways to support students' learning. So you can see the whole ESSA law on the Department of Education website, but those are really the three big things that are defined in that around 21st CCLC programs. The next one is the Government Performance Results Modernization Act, or GEPRA. Right, GEPRA was the government's implementation of a systematic process for improving organizational effectiveness. And so GEPRA was passed not just for 21st CCLC programs, but for the entire government to continually improve through data analysis. Now, this is where I said we are all working towards the same goals, because here's what you'll learn as you dig into GEPRA a little bit. In relation to 21st CCLC programs, all across the country, we're measuring a few things. Number one is student academic achievement in math and English. Everybody is looking at that at every 21st CCLC program across the country. Number two is student rates of homework completion, attendance, participation, and demonstration of positive behaviors, right? So we're looking at how much 21st CCLC programs are impacting those things for every student in the nation who attends one of these programs. And then the last is the number of adults served. We're also looking at expenditures and other things like that as well, but those are really the key things, right? These 21st CCLC programs are helping move the needle for our students and their learning, their behaviors, and their engagement. For you as a new leader, this is important to know because you're going to help in the collection of this information. So if you're a state leader, you're going to be required to report this data to the U.S. Department of Education. If you're a new program director or project director, you'll be required to report it to your state. And if you're a new site coordinator, you're going to be responsible for collecting this data. That includes student attendance, right? Student grades, student test scores, all of that. And so as you think about that, it's important to recognize that we all play a role in this work that is occurring. The next piece is the Education Department General Administrative Regulations, or EDGAR. So EDGAR is really about student privacy. And within that, we find the Family Education Rights and Privacy Regulations that define this. So sharing data and information is crucial for our 21st CCLC programs. You just heard me say that you're going to be responsible to report student grades, student attendance, student test scores, right? But we have to do it in compliance and following the regulations regarding the storing and sharing of student information. And so it's important to understand that there's guidance in EDGAR and particularly in FERPA, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Regulations, regarding the access and disclosure of educational records. And it's important that each of you, but especially those who have that data in your hands on a regular basis, right? Those site coordinators that are in the room, you're going to have responsibilities to protect student data that you collect via enrollment forms, right? If you're a program director, to make sure that there's procedures in place for records to be kept safe. Next is non-regulatory guidance. This is a document that addresses the many areas that impact 21st CCLC programs. It helps you stay compliant. In general, this document provides practical information and answers the most frequently asked questions that 21st CCLC programs have. Right now, the non-regulatory guidance is pending revisions. But specifically, this document outlines how states apply for funding and then make awards to grantees. It explains expectations such as consulting educational research for best practices, and it offers details on how to interpret and use many laws and regulations. Especially for those of you who are state leaders in the room, it's important for you to know how to interpret this guidance in order to share it with your grantees, with the program directors, with the site coordinators in the room. So we are ready to see how well you've been listening. And so we have a little yes, no question for you. And you can grab your annotation tool if you would like to. You can find it down, depending on what version of Zoom you have, either down at the bottom of the screen or up at the top of the screen. Find your annotation tool and you can answer this question. Yes or no, EDGAR provides guidance about disclosing any student or family information. If you can't find your annotation tool, you can also just drop your answers for us in the chat. We got some yeses. So yes, Edgar provides guidance about disclosing any student or family information. Lovely, you were listening. Next is 21st CCLC programs have complete flexibility and freedom in the activities and services they provide. What do you think? Said yes, is that a no?
We've got a lot of people chiming in on no over here, Hillary.
Correct. Thank you. So our programs, they're bound by ESSA and GEPRA. The purpose is very clear. We're trying to improve academic performance and provide those enrichment opportunities for low-income communities. And so it's important to understand that 21st CCLC programs are not just like roll out the ball and silly string in your hair after school or out of school time programs. They are something different. Next, every state is allocated 21st CCLC funds that are then awarded to grantees.
I think this one might be stumping folks a little bit. It's we're scratching our brains trying to figure things out. We have a few yeses.
I mean, the goal was for them to get a little bit more tricky as we went along, for sure. Kind of a mixed bag. So yes, once states are allocated funding from the Federal Department of Education, each state releases that request for proposal that Brittany mentioned earlier, or that RFP or RFA. So potential grantees can apply for funding and explain how their program is going to serve the community, meet the greatest needs, and really address the issues in their community and in their space. Well, thank you all for jumping in, taking a little quiz, and I am going to pass it over to Brittany, who's going to talk to you about uniform guidance.
Thanks, Hillary. So uniform guidance, this uniform administrative requirements, it's also cost principles and audit requirements for federal awards, is better known more simply as uniform guidance. Uniform guidance is what the government has put together to help us better understand how we should go about implementing the laws that are outlined. And there are many aspects to uniform guidance, but two concepts that you will most likely be impacted by are outlines around eligibility, pre and post award administrative requirements, and day-to-day management practices. You can always check out more at grants.gov to take a deeper dive. And the other piece is that it's outlining federal cost principles. So governing costs, allowable costs, and costs that require approval. And there's a lot of very important information because it's funding, right? And it is tied back to federal, and we need to be very careful that we're following this uniform guidance and spending the money appropriately per the laws, right? This is important for site coordinators as well, because you are the ones that are managing that budget, right? You're spending the money to hire your staff. You're spending the money to do the things that you need to do in your program to make it happen. And so you need to make sure that you're familiar with what you can and what you cannot spend money on. So let's do a little activity together and try to identify what things might be allowable or unallowable. So first up, we have pay for volunteers. Do you think that that is an allowable or an unallowable expense? You can think about it and drop it in the chat. So for several years, the school has run a theater program using volunteers. After receiving the 21st CCLC grant, they want to use those funds to pay the volunteers and support them in the theater program. I see a lot of you are saying unallowable. I'm also seeing in the chat as well as on the screen, you guys are correct. So paying volunteers in this scenario, not allowable. I'm going to clear our drawings. Let's try another one. So background checks. We're hiring staff for the new 21st CCLC grant and need to pay for their background checks. Is that allowable or unallowable? I'm seeing on the screen here, thank you for your annotations, that's allowable. I also see in the chat, you guys are on fire. Yes, this is allowable. And also something that is within the realm of best practices and requirements, right? In that education setting, we need to be doing this. All right, let's clear drawings to try another one. Here we are looking for ways to incentivize enrollment in the programs. I want to provide bonuses to site coordinators who meet their enrollment goals. You think that's allowable or unallowable? And you guys are getting really good at this annotation tool. Yes, you are correct. Bonuses are not allowable under 21st CCLC funding. If you want to do that, you're going to have to find other ways of funding to support those specific things. Let's try a few more. So here we have marketing materials. You'd like to make program t-shirts and hats to hand out at an open house, specifically for marketing purposes. Is that allowable or unallowable? See some people chiming in here on both allowable and unallowable. So, unfortunately, it is unallowable. You cannot spend 21st CCLC funds on marketing materials. Great. There's just two more we're going to try. And so for additional teacher pay, the last few years, the school has paid one teacher a day to provide tutoring to students after school 3 days a week. And you would like to partner with the existing tutoring plan and hire an additional teacher to work each day. What do you think? Allowable, unallowable? Lots of people chiming in here on allowable. You are correct. So this ties to staffing, right? And one of the things that can be funded through the 21st CCLC funds. All right, last one for you. So, whoop, click too fast and it answered for you. So think about this example. You're launching a new STEM program for this semester and need to purchase supplies, Legos, batteries, masking tape, other supplies for those activities. Those are allowable. It is directly tied to the things that your program is looking to accomplish to support. In this case, it's a STEM project, which is going to support your math goals. These supplies are allowable. And I saw earlier in the chat that there was a request for where to access some of these documents. And Hillary, thank you. It looks like you dropped a link in the chat. So for folks who are interested in that, just take a look in the chat below to get the link to be able to access some of those documents. So now that you've walked through this exercise, what do you think are some of the differences between allowable and unallowable expenses? What makes it so that they fall into those specific buckets? Some things may feel a little obvious, right? Like hiring staff, that's an allowable expense. That makes a lot of sense. But you might have questions about like, well, why can't I do marketing materials to be able to promote and grow my program, right? Here we have from someone in the chat, the money spent has to go back to the original goals. It has to directly support program delivery. These are two really great observations. We want to make sure that the use of the funds is appropriate and it is ultimately supporting the goals of 21st CCLC. And yes, we want enrollments. But in this case, hats and t-shirts is not going to be the thing that's going to, support the program delivery. That's the biggest piece there. So how can we ensure that our programs are doing proper application of these funds? Well, as new program leaders, become familiar with that budget that was part of the application. Talk to whoever your next level up is, right? Is it your SEA? Is it do you have a program director? Is the principal of the school involved? To ask them questions and better understand what was written in the grant if you were not part of that process in developing the program plan, and understand from the beginning how you can start spending those funds. That's going to make sure that that you're starting off on a nice strong foot, everybody's on the same page. There's going to be questions along the way, and that's okay. You can always go back and ask those questions, but becoming familiar with what was written is very important. Any other thoughts on that, Hillary?
I was going to say, Brittany, and especially program leaders, if you have a question, your state fiscal people would love for you to ask them before you spend the money, and they have to tell you you can't spend money on that. If you just say, hey, I need a little clarity around a specific area. I have some questions around. They want to answer those questions. So I would encourage you, don't be afraid of them. Like, they're not there only to hold the line and make sure you're doing the right things fiscally, but to support you in the process. And so please ask them some of those questions, especially if they're very specific or niche type of questions that need some details from your state.
And this is a lot of information to take in, especially if you are brand new to 21st C. There are so many people that you can go to ask questions, to be able to get some support, because it's not realistic to memorize all the laws and regulations and have all the answers. That is something that takes time to learn, and then of course there's things that'll change in the laws and regulations. So look to those higher ups about who you can ask those questions for that level of support. As we continue to think about funding, and you may have heard these terms before, it's very important to make sure that we keep these things in mind. Supplement, not supplant. It is important to understand that fiscal requirements and best practices, including the difference here between supplanting and supplementing and what costs are allowable, is very important to how you operate the funding part of your 21st CCLC program. So to supplant is to replace something with something else, while supplementing is to enhance something by adding to it. Excuse me. So these are rules governing, there are rules governing this distinction, and one is allowable and the other is not. 21st century funds may not be used to supplant existing federal, state, or local funds. So here on we have from ESSA, it comes directly from the laws, right? The state educational agency or local educational agency shall use federal funds received under Title I, Part A only to supplement the funds that would, in the absence of such federal funds, be made available from state and local sources for the education of students participating in programs assisted under Title I, Part A, and not to supplant such funds. It's written directly in the law for us. I also think in the chat, thank you, Sean, that it's so critical, right? Allowable versus unallowable can cause leaders to go down a rabbit hole. He always told staff to be cautious and to really understand this guidance. Even if allowable, is it reasonable and necessary? If you were audited, would you feel comfortable supporting your decision? 99% of the time, yes, but if in doubt, ask. Great advice. So the funding part, it can be overwhelming, but again, asking the questions, getting familiar with your documents are going to be the most important starting point for you. And speaking of which, I'll hand things back over to Hillary to talk a little bit more about looking at.
Yeah, so now that we've reviewed really what is that foundation for 21st CCLC programming as a whole, this legislation and guidance that comes with it, we're going to dive into your specific program. And we encourage you to begin by examining your existing grant. From there, you can begin to look at design, you can begin to look at implementation, but the starting place really is, do you know what got written in the grant? Brittany said it very first thing. But the other thing that I would encourage you to do is look at the request for proposal or the request for application, whichever RFP or RFA your state offered, especially if you're launching a new program that hasn't existed, especially if you just received that grant, because that will tell you the things that your state is looking for, that your state is requiring. So that's strategy number one. Strategy number two that we're going to talk a little bit more about is bringing together stakeholders. I don't remember who it was, but that was one of the biggest recommendations that somebody who said, I've been around for a while, and that's what I would recommend to the new program leaders that you do. And that's really an important part of the process. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but we're going to start by talking about the grant. And so I want to do a quick check to see how familiar you are with your grant proposal. So this is not a test. You can be honest. Remember, we're here to help. So how familiar are you? Could you recite it from memory? You've read it, you have a pretty good understanding of it. Maybe you've skimmed it, you could use a little refresher, or you've kind of heard in that word of mouth way what's in it. People have told you what they think is written in there, or maybe what they know is written in there. So grab those annotation tools or drop them in the chat, let us know.
So quite a few people are annotating here for us. We so far do not have anyone that says that they could recite it from memory.
Good. I think that's probably not worth your brain power to do, actually.
But a lot of people, it seems like the majority of our folks are between I've read it and have a good understanding, and I've skimmed it and could use a refresher. And there's a handful of people that are in that last category of people have shared that information. But it looks like most of our folks have at least read it in some
Yeah, absolutely.
capacity.
Yeah. So I would encourage you to read it if you haven't. And sometimes it's something that leaders higher than you have determined, oh, well, maybe they don't need that, or they think that you don't need that. But it's a great way, especially if you're somebody like a site coordinator and you're trying to develop and build your skills, ask. Say, hey, I'd really like to look at this. I better want to understand the 21st CCLC program as a whole and our program specifically. It's a really great opportunity to better understand the work that you're doing. And I think many good supervisors would encourage you in that if you can make some space and time for it. So I'd encourage you, make sure you take that time, you reread it if you're somebody who's maybe skimmed it but could use a refresher, or if you wrote that grant 8 months ago and now it's starting and you're like, I haven't thought about it in a long time because I needed a break from that thing. Take that time, dig in right now, make sure you take some time and read it. So let's talk a little bit about how your grant came to be. We've mentioned some pieces of it, but we want to pull this back together, right? So the federal funds are granted to the state or territory departments of education. We've already talked about that today. And then your state or territory 21st CCLC coordinator, or sometimes we call them the state education agency coordinators, create a request for proposal or a request for application that defines the federal eligibility requirements, but they also have state requirements that many states have said, this is something that's important to us here in our state that you need to comply with. That's in addition to all federal requirements that you're expected to comply with. Then you submit this proposal. It describes your vision, your plan, how you're going to help support the meeting of those goals that we're all working towards, right? The academic goals, the social development goals, the attendance goals, the engagement with learning goals. And then a panel of peer reviewers score the proposals. All of these grants are competitive. You got them because you wrote one of the best grants. And then grants are awarded and you become state level grantees that you report to your state coordinators. So once you take the time to look at that request for proposal or request for application, it's important to pay attention to eligibility requirements and priorities. This is essential information as your program evolves, right? It's essential to know that in your state, they're focusing on this other important thing, right? And those are going to be things that you're going to develop and lean into your goals around. You're going to make sure that you're providing program offerings around. So I am thinking, I will not name any states, but I'm thinking about a state that has a requirement and priorities around health and wellness. If that's your state, if you're one of the states that has priorities around that, it's important to remember that as you continue through your planning and implementation, because one of the things that happens in programs is that sometimes we lose our focus, right? We forget about the things that we've either said we're going to do or that our state's asking us to do, and get distracted. And so as you review, I'm going to encourage you, your grant proposal, as you review this grant proposal and as you write, I want to encourage you to make sure that you answer for yourself a couple key questions, because this critical task of knowing your grants is especially important to know what are the things you're going to do and how you're going to do them. So the first thing that we're going to think about is the cost. So the question you need to make sure that you can answer is, what budget did you propose, right? And you want to validate your budget by working with your state agency to review your budget. Sometimes when you get awarded a grant, your state agency is going to come back and work through pieces of that with you. And to make sure that you're staying in line with the spending categories that you've agreed to or that you've put in the budget itself. Next is scope. Scope is what you said you were going to do. And so make sure that you know the answer to the question, what did you say that you were going to do, right? Are there pieces of your plan that aren't clear? Or are there pieces of your plan that were very specific and you're not actually doing them? Did you say, we're going to use this health and wellness curriculum? And then when you stand as a program director on site in that program, you're not using it. Those are questions you need to be asking yourself. Next is quality. What quality indicators did you propose? Did you consider principles of effectiveness or activity design? What learning approaches or methods did you say that you were going to use? What communication plan did you put in place? How about a staffing plan? Do you have the right people on your team based on what you said you were going to do in your proposal? And how about your professional development plan? Do you have a plan around offering that? You see, all of those things go into developing a quality program, but sometimes it's easy to forget that we said we were going to hire somebody whose job was all focused around data, or that our staff were going to get a certain number of professional development hours every year, right? Those are important parts of making sure that you have quality in place and that you're doing what you said that you would do. And then time. How much time do you have to do the work, right? What operations plan did you propose to get the work done? And so many of us, we think about our programs in a year to year basis, but really, you may have a grant that's 3 years or 5 years. You may be coming into a grant that's partially completed or somewhere in that cycle. And being aware of where you are in that plan is an important part of that process as well. Then you want to review what was approved, right? You want to look at what are your program needs, what are your existing goals, and what is your existing schedule and program format. So one of the things that we recommend is that if you haven't done so already, create a simple, like one pager that captures this information, right? It can be a really powerful reference sheet. It can ground your staff in the approved application. It can even be something that you share with those stakeholders, those people on your team that we're going to talk about a little bit later, as you think about what needs to happen. And we're saying this over and over. Again, we're stressing it really heavily today because, yes, it's good practice, but we also recognize that you're at the place right now where you can ground yourself in effective and best practices and have a high quality program. And once you take off running faster and faster, it gets harder to come back to it. So do it now in this new part of the school year as you get ready to move into it, depending on what state you live in, right? We know we need to move fast and we need to get our programs running, but in the long run, taking the time now to root your decisions in your grant will increase the likelihood of accomplishing your goals. And that's what we want. We just finished a large group of 21st CCLC practitioners from across the country were together a few weeks ago in California, highlighting 21st CCLC programs, talking about best practices. And, we want you to be one of those programs that get invited up on the stage. One of those programs that we're saying, look at what they're doing, right? That this is an amazing program. That's what we want for you. That's what Brittany, some of the other leaders on this call dream for you. And you do that by staying rooted in your goals, rooted in what you said you would do. Right? Because your grant got picked because you had a strong plan. That said, as we work through this series and we think about the considerations and the strategies for implementing this effective program, we want to walk you through what it looks like to have a well and fully developed goal, right? So that those needs that we know that our young people have, the challenges that they're facing, are played directly into the things that we do every day in our programs in order to make improvement happen. Because the thing is that when we understand what our youth need and we're intentional about how we address that, that's where that change happens. That's where quality improvement happens. And that's the journey we all want to be on. So that said, we are going to look at some program needs statements, right? So the first piece that we're going to look at is on your screen. So 70% of students failed to meet standards on the state math assessment. And when you dig in a little deeper, teachers reported that fifth grade students failed to master fractions and decimals. Now, many of you may have in your grant proposal information that sounds like that first statement, right? That information that sounds like 70% of students failed to meet standards on the state math assessment. That's data that's often publicly available. You can find it online, right? But you may need to be in the place where you dig in a little more now and find out what your students really need, right? Where you find out that teachers are saying, yeah, our students, they can't really do fractions or they're struggling with decimals. And when we take the time and we understand what they're really wrestling with, that allows us to target our work more, target what we do in our programs more. Because now we're no longer saying they are struggling in math. We say, I can spend my time and attention on fractions, on decimals. And that gives me somewhere to go with my programming. That gives me an opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to really focus in on the arts this year. And in our doing arts, we're going to lean way into fractions and decimals. We're going to use a lot of measuring as part of this work. And we're going to create that space and opportunity to develop that. And we'll continue and talk about that as we go through the week. But I want you to get thinking like that, right? The next one is an example where we see reading records show that 58% of elementary students aren't reading on grade level. This, again, might be information you can get from your school, might be information that's publicly available. But to better understand that students struggle with decoding and reading fluency, and that's 51% of them, that's more in-depth information that you need to get from that school partner, right? Yana said at the beginning when we said, what information do you need? What is the thing that you can recommend that's most powerful? She said, build those strong relationships with your school day partners, because your school day partners, they have that information. They know specifically what skills your students are struggling with. And then in turn, if you have those strong relationships with them, it's really easy to say, hey, what are they struggling with? Right. And that can look all kinds of different ways depending on the scope and scale of your program. So I'm thinking about a program in New Jersey where if you talk to any of the staff, they know specifically that the students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade struggle with poetry and specifically rhyming. That's something that they all know and have worked on over their and through their summer program. You may go to another program. I'm thinking about a program in Ohio where that site coordinator will tell you that she walks down the hall and talks to the teachers in her students' classrooms on a regular basis. And she has a plan of which teachers she's going to see every day. And it's just maybe a 3 to 5 minute conversation, but she collects all those conversations and uses them in her activity planning. It's really about being intentional. Sean says that he always says, plan it, do it, improve it, but you have to go in that order. And that's really what we're saying, right? You have to take the time right now to plan so that you can do what you need to do and then continue this cycle of improvement, right? We want to be people that are continuously improving for the good of our young people, right? It's not about just asking you to do one more thing, because we hear that sometimes when we visit programs. It's about saying, this is what makes a difference. Okay, let's look at another example. So 74% of students passed C- average or above the fall semester science course. That may be data that your school would share with you. But teachers report that students struggle with the design, feedback, and revision process. That's more in-depth information, right? And these types of need statements are going to be more than what you're finding in your grant. And that's what we need to dig into next, right? Once you've reviewed that grant, it's time to dig deeper and understand what they're struggling in math, or they're struggling in literacy, or there's behavior problems really means in your context. And so that may be work that you as a site coordinator need to do. That may be work that you as a program director need to do, right, with somebody who's in a leadership role. All of that is saying that it's important to understand the needs of the students in your programs so that you can take those need statements and turn them into goals. Because it's those need statements that say, here's where our young people are struggling, but we can do something about it, right? I hope you're like, yeah, I can do something about this, right? I hope you're coming into this new school year with energy and hope for the future for our young people. And so our SMART goals are goals that are specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant, and they're time bound, right? And so we're going to look at two examples based on some of the data that was just shared. So the first one, by the end of the school year, 60% of the students that attended more than half of the program sessions will meet grade level standards on the math assessment. Now, that means a couple of things. Number one, that means that we need to know who was doing well or not well on state math assessments, right? So there's data we need to collect. We need to know who's attending our programs. There's information that we need to keep as a site coordinator. We need to make sure that we're offering programs that support that math learning, because you can say that's a goal, but if you aren't doing activities that then support that math learning, specifically in the areas where students are struggling, they're never going to make the progress that you need them to, right? Let's look at the next one. By the end of the semester, 80% of regularly attending students will be able to write an article on a topic of interest using grade level vocabulary based on a rubric. So there's a few pieces here that we need to be thinking about, right? One of the pieces is we need students to regularly come to our program, because if they're not showing up for our program, how are we going to make a difference for them, right? We need to create places to practice those skills they need, right? We need places to increase their vocabulary. How are we going about doing that? What vocabulary are we exposing them to that maybe they're not getting during the school day? Or how are we engaging with vocabulary in ways that they're not during the school day? And not making it so they just click off and don't want to come to our program. Because that's a real challenge too, right? Because as much as out of school time programs and 21st CCLC programs specifically are designed to support academic achievement, they also still need to engage our students' interest. And so maybe it's not just writing an article for the sake of writing an article, but are you starting a newspaper, right? Are you writing an article to go in your local newspaper, right? Something that your students might engage in, might be interested in. Are they writing a book? I don't know. That's an important question as you begin to design your activities. It's important for us to be thinking about how our activities inform and how our goals inform our activities, and how our activities are chosen based on what our students want and need in our program. That said, before I go too far, I'm going to let Brittany talk more about intentional design.
So we've taken a look at the needs. We have better understood crafting that SMART goal, and being very intentional around each aspect, that it's specific, that it's measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant, and that it is time bound. We have that goal. How do we then create activities and build our program in order to support those goals and those needs, right? So when the grant was written, someone gathered this information, they put into the application the needs and the goals, and proposed selected delivery strategies, interventions, activities that would ultimately support those goals. And in that application, proposed a design of a program. And we'll take then a look at all this information to create the program schedule, thinking about what interventions do we need for our students to support those goals. I'm thinking about, those low math and reading scores. What interventions are you going to put into place to specifically support those needs? What activities are you going to build out to make sure that it's engaging and interesting and relevant, and not like the school day, that it is the way that OST should be, which is different, out of the box, and connected to real world, right? And then the delivery strategies within those activities, how you're going to be supporting students and providing this information. All of these things together along with your program schedule. These are all the magical little pieces that form your OST puzzle. So one of the things to understand here is the stakeholders that are going to be connected to your program. After you've read through that RFP or RFA, you'll recognize that there is a focus on the importance of reaching out to others within the community. And some of these are obvious, and some of these you'll need to think a little bit about, but then working together with them to meet the needs of the students. So after you've confirmed, again, in the application, the RFP, the RFA, that your organization meets the eligibility requirements, which you have if you've been awarded, then you can set your sights on getting the different stakeholders that you need involved, bringing them to the table so that they can help plan and design your 21st CCLC program. That includes our school day partners, right? We need buy-in from our school day partners, because where are our students coming from? They're coming from school. Where do their academic needs, information, all that come from? It comes from the school day, right? And so we need that buy-in from our school day partners. Whether you're an in-school program, whether you're, a school district or a school that is hosting a 21st CCLC program, or if you're a community-based organization that has partnered with a school district, you still need that buy-in from the people who are there during the school day. Teachers, administrators, all of them. You need students, of course. It wouldn't be a program if it wasn't for the students, but most importantly from the students need consistency. And this is where there needs to be a very clear line between, this is not aftercare, but yet there's an aftercare element to it, right? But it's so much deeper than that. And so students need to be committed and consistent in their attendance. And without that, then you're not able to work towards those goals and make an impact on those outcomes that you want to change, right? They have to be there. They have to be consistent. Our partners, you may not have all of the answers or all of the skills that you need in your wheelhouse. And that's whenever we can look to partners to collaborate with. Thinking back to that example of, there's a teacher that was coming in doing tutoring a few days a week, and you're looking to expand that and bring in more teachers to offer more tutoring services. But maybe you also need to look at, maybe there's tutoring agencies around that you can partner with and collaborate and to bring in those supports and make it more meaningful and impactful in your space. And then, of course, our families, right? Our families, they want to know that when they're agreeing to have their children be in this program, that the things that we're going to do within our programs are going to make a change, right? They're going to be impactful as a result of participation in this program, especially because, what that goal of 21st CCLC being to provide services to communities that maybe don't have the same access or have a higher level of need, whether it's because of low performing or maybe a low income area, right? Families need that. And you need their buy-in for all these other pieces to work out. So looking more into that community aspect, right? There are many resources available within your community, and everywhere there's, thank you all for introducing yourself. You're from all over the United States. You all have different kinds of communities and things that are within your circle, right? And they're going to differ from place to place, and that's okay. But by tapping into the resources within in your community, that can help you in developing your OST program. So these resources may look different from your cities, your urban areas, to your rural, to your ultra rural areas. But for example, there might be business leaders in your community, probably in every community, right? In an urban environment, perhaps those leaders may include leaders of banks or large organizations and nonprofits. In a rural area, maybe you find partners that are farmers or small business owners. After you've taken some time to look at potential partners within your area, you want to think about some questions to see about the potential of that partnership and whether it's worth pursuing, whether it's connected to your goals and outcomes, right? So think about, is the organization well established within the community, and does it understand the issues and perspectives of children and families in our community? Here's an example. Has that organization worked with students and or families from a similar background as those in your program? This can be really important to make sure that it is a relevant partnership to the community that you serve, but also that people are seeing who they're seeing themselves in who you're working with, right? Thinking about, do you have similar goals and a similar mission? This is key because you want to make sure that you have a shared vision and understanding of the future. You might not align in those things, and that's okay, but it might not be the best thing for your program to partner with some organization or community agency that is, the complete opposite from what your intentions are or your goals are or your community, right? Also think about, does that organization bring skills and expertise that are currently lacking in your program? I mentioned, not having something within your wheelhouse, right? Does that outside organization bring a benefit to your program that you personally can't offer or your team can't offer, right? Have you checked to see if you've tapped into the expertise of your staff first? Are there any connections that they have that might be able to build out that community and bring in new partners? And then also think about in what way that your program needs to support that organization, right? Because it's not a one-way street, right? You're bringing in and thinking about community agencies working with you as a partner, but what is the cost on your side for that partnership? What will this partnership cost your program in terms of time, funds? Will it be sustainable? Excuse me. You might find that based on the budget that was within the application, that you won't be able to afford or perhaps engage a community partner because of budgetary constraints, whether that's amount of dollars or type of dollars, right? It could be both. With all this working together, your school day partners, your community partners, your program, you can work together to mobilize and ultimately attain your program goals. The beautiful thing about 21st CCLC is that it really is rooted in community and engaging all stakeholders and finding success through those relationships. So who are your stakeholders? Excuse me. We're going to take some time to kind of think about where you are right now in your new program phase, new leader phase. And as you think about who is on your team, you will want to make sure that you're engaging a strong group of stakeholders. So based on all the things that we've discussed today, what stakeholder do you want to add or need to add to your program team next? Drop it in the chat. Who are you currently missing? Who do you not have right now? Do you need to engage with those school day partners? Have you not thought about who is in your community that you can engage? Maybe you're an existing program and you already have all these things, but what's on your wish list? What is something that you want to grow in or improve upon? Hillary, any thing to add?
I would just say that when we're talking about a program team, we're literally talking about an advisory committee or team who's going to talk to you and support you in the work that you're doing, so you're not doing it on your own. Like, very practically, we're thinking about those people. And so Brittany mentioned school day partners, right? That may be your school principal, but it also could be somebody who the principal says, no, this person's your person. It could be an assistant principal or a counselor or somebody else who, right, you work very closely with at that school. But I hope you also have some students on that program team, right? Some young people who are willing to say, yeah, I'm part of this and I have things to say about what you're doing. I hope that you have a parent or two who are in your corner, who are saying, this is what we're experiencing as parents, right? A school board member who doubles as a parent. That's a perfect combo, right? That gives you both sides of the picture and of the conversation. I hope that, especially if you're a school only, that you have some community organizations on your program team, right? That they're coming and joining the conversation. That it's not just the school needs to connect with the school, but you're reaching out into your community. How is this program impacting? What resources are out there? It can be really easy as a school to get your tunnel vision on. So, who's somebody who either you're excited about on your program team or who you wish was on your program team who's not?
I love that you mentioned students, Hillary, and I'm sure some of the folks joining us today are running programs that serve older youth, maybe middle or high school students. And what a great way to get them engaged in leadership opportunities and to really dive into student voice and choice, even for our elementary school students too. I mean, but whenever I think about how to create meaningful programming, particularly for our older youth who have a million and one things going on as they're thinking about, whatever their preferred after school activities or their future or their job or, all those things. What a great way to get them to chime in on building something from the ground up and designing it to really meet their needs and tying in their wants. And if you guys are still thinking about this, that's okay. This doesn't happen overnight. But thinking about who can plan with you, our parent coordinator, love that. Is there a PTA at the school that you could coordinate with whoever organizes that? That would be another great way to even just partner with something that exists within the school day that can help get the information out about your.
Yeah, somebody from the PTA would be another great example, great leader, right? All of those kinds of people be thinking about that. And if you're coming into a program or into a role and you realize there's not a program team, then this is a great time of year to start one. Like people are figuring out what they're going to join, what they're going to be a part of. And it's a great time to say, hey, we want to kick this off. If you're a program director and you have a program team for your whole program, think about, do we have a site coordinator on our team, right? Who is that person and how will you make sure that you bring these people together to really make your program as successful as it possibly can be? So, that said, we, in the next couple of minutes, just want to remind you that we also want to be part of your team. And that said, we would like to show you some of the resources that we have to offer for you, right? And the first being that we are getting ready to launch a new leaders community of practice. So if you want spaces and places to connect with other new leaders on a regular basis, ongoing through this year, to ask questions, to dig into the things that you're wrestling with together, please let us know that you're interested. You can fill out this form. We'll try and find a time that works for as many people as possible. And you can join this community of practice that we're going to have. But I am going to head to our website next. Sorry, Brittany. I think I'm sending mixed messages to Brittany about what I'm doing next. So we are The 21st CCLC NTAC, I talked a little bit about what we do here, but the reality is there are so many resources here for you. This is the New Leaders Academy. It's today, tomorrow, and Thursday, but you can see on our homepage what things are upcoming. You'll see that we have a variety of webinars. Right now, we're hosting the New Leaders Academy, but we'll be able to see that there's other things upcoming. We do huddles. These are 30-minute information grab and goes with tools and resources you can use. We also have office hours. This is a place to come with your questions. So you can register for that on our website, 21stcclcntac.org. This is not the only way to get information though, because if you scroll back up to the top and choose our resources, you can see several things here. First is our professional learning portal. This is where we have housed all of our courses. So there's courses that either you can take, you can assign staff to take, you can use for training your own staff, right? But there's a series on leadership, on learning recovery, on guiding positive student behavior. There's these micro learnings that you can do in less than 15 minutes that are like audio briefs. You can listen to them driving in the car, your new podcast, if you're looking for some information on all kinds of different topics, as well as toolkits, right? These are all of the things that you need to have to begin to develop a certain kind of content area, whether it's develop a program around learning recovery for students who've experienced learning loss during the COVID-19 pandemic. It could be around guiding positive student behavior. And the training kits are actually my favorite. These are PowerPoints and activities that you as leaders can use to train your staff, right? You download the PowerPoint, it tells you exactly what to say and what to do, but it gives you a chance to invest in your staff. And you don't have to figure out exactly how to form it or what to say or what activity to do. Also on our website, if you scroll back up to the top, you'll be able to see under our resources that we have archived resources. For those of you who asked, I got some direct messages about where to find the videos from this webinar. You can find them in this section. Also, if you were familiar with the Y4Y platform, all of the Y4Y tools and resources are archived here. So you can go back to them, you can get anything that you're missing, but we have so many resources on the Y4Y website. It's not just limited to what you see on our portal. But as I said, the recordings are also here from things that we've already done. So if you're interested in going back to topics like inclusion, if you're interested in going back to topics like trauma, informed care and mandated reporting, or on leadership, any of the webinars that we've done in the past year are hosted here. You can come back and see them, as well as any resources that were shared during them. And then the last thing that I'm going to encourage you to do in these last couple of minutes is I'm going to encourage you to connect with us. So there are several ways that you can do that, and I'm going to highly recommend two of them. The first is that you can contact our 21st CCLC National Technical Assistance Center for training, resources, and support. And so if you're a state leader, we'd encourage you, if you have something that you need as far as training or professional development for your programs, to reach out to us and complete a TA request. And if you're a program leader, we also welcome your request. All of those requests will get put in front of your state leaders, and then we will be able to work with you to find strategies or tools and resources to support them. The second thing I'm going to ask you to do, or encourage you to do besides the TA request, is subscribe to the 21st CCLC NTAC Messenger. That is the best way to get information about what's upcoming, what new resources have been released, about best practices in the field, and who's doing what. And so I'd encourage you to take a moment and subscribe to that. We will not spam you. You will get one email from us a month with the updates about what's coming down the pike. And so if you're looking for information, you're looking for resources, you just kind of want to know in your back pocket about what's going to come, we'd encourage you to do that. And then you also can follow us on our social media. We have both Twitter and X, and so we'd encourage you to stay connected with us. In these last couple of minutes, I do want to make sure that we answer any questions that you have, so feel free to drop those either in the chat or in the Q&A box. I also want to make sure that I mention that this is not a one-day conversation. So tomorrow we will be talking about strategies for managing your program's moving parts. There are a lot of pieces. We hope you're not feeling too overwhelmed by the things you've already heard today, and that's why we're doing it in small bites. But come back and learn about some techniques and strategies you can use. And then on Thursday, we'll be talking about needs assessment and intentional activity design. The last thing I will say is please stay informed. Visit our website, 21stcclcntac.org, send us an email, sign up for the newsletter, or follow us on social media. And then the last thing I will ask from you before I answer questions is this. Please complete our feedback form. I dropped it in the chat. You all know, you heard us say today, data collection is part of your work that you are going to do. It is also part of our work because we work on a project that's part of the U.S. Department of Education's work. And so we want to make sure that these sessions are meeting your needs. And so we're going to ask you to complete our feedback form. We want to hear from you about what we can do to help improve your experience in these sessions. We also, again, will encourage you to register for the New Leaders Academy. And we want to make sure that we make space and time for questions in these last like 4 or 5 minutes, because there's a lot of things likely spinning in your brains. So Brittany, anything else that I'm missing?
You were talking about questions. There was one question I saw in the chat that I don't think that got answered. It was very specific around can I get t-shirts for staff? Back when we were talking about marketing materials. Marketing materials are different than t-shirts for staff, but honestly, I would recommend looking at your budget and asking the questions of your financial leaders to understand like what that counts as in their book of financial rules and regulations, because it might be slightly different state to state, and I don't want to say yes and it be different from place to place. So just double check your budget and double check with your fiscal leaders.
Absolutely. Like I said, they want to answer questions for you, so please check in with them. They are really designed to be a resource. They want to provide that technical assistance that you may need as you start in this conversation. So, yeah. And just because you can't fund things with 21st CCLC funds doesn't mean that you can't have things too, right? Sometimes that's where those community partnerships come in that Brittany talked about, right? Because you may have a local community organization or a business who's willing to sponsor t-shirts and put their name on the back, right? And so I would encourage you just check all of that out. I do see one question about where these recordings are going on the website. So let's go back and navigate to that one more time, Brittany. So if you go to our resources at the top of any page, you can find that and go down to archived resources. That's where all of the recordings will go. There's past recordings there in the archived resources from things that we've done over the last year, but you also will see eventually the New Leaders Academy, but give us a little bit of time to get it up there. Those things don't happen overnight, even though I wish they did. But if you know somebody else who should be joining the New Leaders Academy who might not have gotten that information, please feel free to share the registration information. It's still available on the homepage, or they can come back later and engage in the recordings. Are there any other questions for us right now? Otherwise, please complete our feedback form and register for the New Leaders Academy. We would love to, or New Leaders Academy Community of Practice. We would love to have you for either of those. think we left them with a lot of homework, Brittany.
Yeah. Well, and that's what it's like in these early phase of getting your program started.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you all. We hope to see you all tomorrow.